first thing, obviously, fire away any questions you've got. I'm happy to answer them. The other thing, I've had a few requests of things to do, but we'll get on with that in a bit. But yeah, first question I've seen here is, hi, thanks for streaming. Love your tracks. Blah blah blah. How do you find Bitwig, and how's it compared to other doors? And do I ever lose any projects? Yeah, no calls from Louis Walsh. No, I don't think he's got my new number. Yeah, so Bitwig, I'm a massive fan of Bitwig. Anyone who follows me on social media will probably know that because I'm always going on about it. But yeah, I mean, I have to say, I knew about it a little while before it came out, and I bought it on the first day it came out. Version 1 was a little bit, rough around the edges, but it's the development rate of that company is just amazing, because they're just constantly bringing out updates, bug fixes, and new features, and that's the most important thing, because they don't just bring out new features like a lot of the other doors do. They actually fix any problems as well. So they're just an amazing company, and considering that there's only 12 people who work there, it's just unbelievable. From what I understand, they were kind of the geniuses behind Ableton Live, and for whatever reason they decided that they'd be better off going out and branching out on their own, which I think was probably a good move, and that kind of explains why there was a massive gap between Ableton 8 and Ableton 9, because yeah, they kind of lost their development team. I think the guy who's the main guy behind Bitwig, the kind of genius programmer, is a guy who did a synth back in the day called Surge by Vembler Audio, I think it was. So he's the one. He's the main man. But obviously they're a great team, and yeah, I have to say it's the one DAW that I've ever used, which I'd be happy if they never updated it again. I mean, I think it's just pretty much perfect the way it is right now. Obviously they've always got new things coming, but yeah, it's a pretty good one, and I've used them all, so I think I'm kind of qualified to say, well, at least give an opinion on doors, because yeah, I've used all of them right back to the Atari, back in the early 90s. I started off on a thing called eMagic Notator, which was just an absolute nightmare to use. It was actually a vertical arrangement rather than horizontal for some reason. And it's funny because you can still see elements of that. That actually went on to become Logic, and you can still see elements of that in Logic now, which is kind of scary considering how old it is. But then I went on to Cubase on the Atari, which was pretty good, although painfully slow comparison to what we're used to nowadays. And then I think went on to Cubase SX, yeah, Cubase SX. I think stayed with Cubase up until about version 3, and then I went to Logic because Logic had virtual instrument channels and Cubase didn't. That was the only reason. And then went back to Cubase for Cubase 4, I think it was, the new Cubase 4, because they now had instrument channels, and then kind of messed around with Live for a bit, went back and forth with Logic, Cubase, went all the way up to I think 7.5 on Cubase. But yeah, as soon as Bitwig came out, I knew that was the one, and the main reason is it's just because they've really thought about what you need to do in this day and age, as opposed to what you needed to do 20 years ago or whatever, however long the other doors have been around. And also it's specifically aimed at dance music, as opposed to trying to be a one-stop shop for every single possible form of music, which is what the other ones like to do. But the main thing is, it's just the workflow. They've just refined everything that they didn't need. They took it out and they concentrated on what was really important, and allowing you to be able to quickly and actually enjoy making music, rather than it being a massive process like a lot of the things, particularly in things like Steinberg, where instead of actually redesigning what they needed to do, they've just added on, and it's like a sticking plaster rather than actually a solution. So that's the thing I like about these guys, is they will actually change the fundamental aspects of the program if they think it's worth doing and it's improved. So yeah, I'm a massive fan. You'll probably see a few of the reasons why, hopefully today. But yeah, I mean, it's just a phenomenal program, and I would urge you all, if you haven't tried it out, go and download the demo. I think it's a fully functional demo. I think you just can't save with it. But yeah, it's a lot of fun to use. So let's have another look. What's the plan tonight? I'm not really sure. Just see how it goes. What was this? Yeah, I bought into one, but it was missing version 1 lock key 3. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, version 1. It was a little bit rough around the edges, like I said, but I think the general idea was there. I certainly used it, and I enjoyed using it. But yeah, since version 2, they've really really taken a hold. And I actually had, that's kind of how I got to know the guys a little bit, because they actually, when you're using it, if you have a problem or a bug that comes up, it submits a crash report. And obviously, because I own the software and it's legitimate, there's they're getting that information from me. And they actually emailed me, and they was like, oh yeah, we're trying to sort out this bug, like, that you've obviously been getting quite a lot. Like, can you explain how how to recreate it and stuff? So I explained all that, and literally within about a week, the next update, it was fixed. So that's kind of how on it they are. And whereas a lot of the other sequencers and doors, they just take months or if not years to sort out any problems. But these guys, they're just on it straight away. So yeah, version 2 definitely took a big step forward, and especially since I think 2.3, where they've added in the extra time stretching algorithms. I mean, they're just amazing. I mean, I'll give you a little example now. I mean, this is one of my favourite time stretch algorithms of all time, really. I mean, it's not the sort of thing that you'd want to use for a high quality stretch, but that's not really why you want it. I've actually got 2 screens as well, but I've only got one being streamed, so you'll just have to take my word for it that there's another screen. But so we got just I'm sure you all know that break, the old Amen break. But yeah, I mean, you've got all the time stretching options here, and this is a good one, because it's like a tape player. So whatever the tempo is, it'll re-pitch the sample, just like a record deck or whatever would, which is always quite useful for certain things. But the one that really impressed me was this cyclic algorithm. And what they actually did, they actually took the Akai stretch algorithm, which, whether you're familiar with it or not, from the old Akai samplers, that was like an integral part of dance music, really, because it was like, it's what people did the time stretch beats with. I mean, a good example of that would be a track called Terminator by Goldie, or Roughage Crew, or whatever it was. Ironically, that wasn't actually time stretching, that was pitch shifting, but it's very much the same principle. But so yeah, if you're talking for a quality stretch, this isn't very good. But if you want to do some sort of like that kind of thing, that's much more. It can be quite a lot of fun. And like the good thing about this is you can control all the the various elements, like the pitch. We can do a pitch. And that's pretty cool. And you can also mess around with the form on it as well, which is it's good for kind of making weird effects. It's a lot of fun. I could mess around with that for hours. But and then obviously you've got all the kind of higher quality, like they've got the Elastic Pro, which is the same as most other doors have now. It's a real high quality, but quite a processor intensive stretch. So what I tend to do is I'll do all my processing and stretch it up, and then bounce it into place, just to solidify the file, and make it easier on the processor. So yeah, that's one of the main things. There's millions of other things, like being able to have MIDI and audio on the same track. So like, say this bass that I'll go through in a little while, I can actually, that's at the moment that's a MIDI, one note of MIDI, but if I want, I can actually make that into an audio track just by bouncing it. So now it's converted that into an audio track, which can be pretty useful. But the main point is that you can have that on the same channel, so that's still going through all the same plugins. So if I take off the plugins, you'll hear the bass as it was. Yeah, it's just a very, very clever program, and there's a lot of things I could explain about it, but that's probably not why you're all here. But anyway, this bass sound, one of the requests I had was to go through how I'd make a bass sound. Now, I mean, the thing to remember is there's a million and one different ways to make a bass sound. This is just one of them. What I did here was I'll just sort of start at the beginning and work my way through it. So also, if you do get any problems with the audio or any glitches or any problems, just let me know in the chat and I'll sort it out straight away. It should be alright, but if it isn't, just let me know. So yeah, with this one, I started off in Serum. Now, I think one of the better ways to make a bass sound is there's quite a lot of restraint that you need, because it's kind of easy to take Serum and then try and make a sound entirely in Serum, and you can get so far with it, but in my experience it's kind of limited. So I think one of the better ways is to sort of make a sound that it's not, you think it's not that great, but it kind of gives you what you need to take it further, if you get my meaning. So with this track, or this bass, sorry, just take all the bits off, and then it'll give you a better idea. So I started off with that wavetable, and use this LFO, which I've also looped the last section of using, but it's an envelope mode, which is one of the cool things about Serum, is that you can have a traditional LFO, or I tend to use these a lot more, the envelope, which is more of a one hit thing, except I have got it looping. To loop it, all you need to do is click on one of the points, and then you set the loop back point there, and then it will loop from there on, as opposed to looping over the whole thing like it would do normally. So yeah, what this is doing, and the other thing I tend to find is that rather than having loads and loads of different modulations going on, that can often sort of end up with the sound being quite confusing, and there's probably too much information going on in the sound. So it's better to modulate off of one source. So with this one, I've first thing I've done is I've modulated this position of the wavetable, and that's kind of, you can see it's jumping between different parts of the wavetable. It kind of gives it that sound. If I take that off, it's not really as exciting, so to speak. And then what I did is I also I've FM'd, which is frequency modulated, the sub into this. So subs, this is quite a good thing to use, because what it means is if you if you modulate off or FM modulate from the sub, it allows you to keep the other oscillator clear, which is ideal really, because then you've got another oscillator. So that's kind of subtle. It doesn't do an awful lot, but it does make a little bit of difference, adds a little bit of extra harmonies. Obviously if I was to put this up to a higher setting, then it would be more noticeable. But for whatever reason I chose that, and then I had this second oscillator. Now the theory is that you have a kind of beefier, more weighty oscillator, which is this one here, providing the beef, and then something else providing the kind of little extra bit on top. So I did this, which I think is one of the standard wavetables. I've actually got quite a lot of wavetables, as you can probably see. It's probably too many in reality, because I spend so long trying to choose them, and then half the time I just end up going for ones that I know. But you can easily find these on the internet. They're pretty easy to find. There's people that create their own and stuff like that, and you can actually make your own as well, which can be fun, but it can be kind of hit and miss as well. So again, what I've done is I've put this LFO1 onto the wave position in the same way as I did with the other one. I've FM'd from this oscillator here. Again, it doesn't make a huge difference, but adds a little certain something. And also I've used the unison to stereo, make that more stereo and stand out from the other oscillator, which is obviously mono and more weighty. A couple of important points to note is normally I would actually change these settings. So I'd probably put these on 1 and maybe bring down the width, but for whatever reason I decided to keep them as standard there. I've also turned off the random so that they're repeating exactly the same each time, because I don't know, unless it's a sort of lead sound or a pad sound or something like that, certainly for a bass you want it to have that kind of consistent feel of starting at the same time. And then I'll put this through just a low pulse filter. The idea to kind of bring it back so that we can keep it more controlled, and then expand on that later, and then add that back in. So that's the main thing. I'll put this noise oscillator in there. I don't know how much that's doing. Yeah, that's adding a little. Yeah, adding a little bit of extra grit there. So that's a nice thing to have. If you click this button here, that basically means that you can pitch the noise. All the noise oscillator really is, it's like a sampler. So if you've got some extra noise samples, which is all out, you can even put your own sample in here if you want. All that all kind of helps to add a little bit extra. And then on the effects page, I've just done a little bit of EQ, which is actually being automated again by this LFO. Again, not kind of subtle difference really, not a massive difference. This you probably find make quite a big difference. This is the old reverb filter, which is I think it's quite popular. A lot of people use this. It's a good one. You can get some pretty sort of extreme sounds, but it's also quite easy to go over the top with this one. But the trick is to try and use it a little bit more subtly. But But yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. And then I've used this multi-band compressor serum. Kind of helps just control it. I always find this thing though, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because I can find it ends up everything sounding really harsh. But just on this particular sound, because it's not a particularly harsh sound to begin with, I think it works well. So that was the sort of main element there. I actually started messing around with this other layer on top, which is pretty much, I think I just copied the patch, or the just, you know, just copied it like this, as you would. That's one of the nice things about Bitwig, is you get this instrument layer set. Well, I think it's called a device actually. Yeah. Let me just show you a new one. So that would be a fresh instrument layer. So basically, yeah, obviously there's nothing in that at the moment, but then you can go through and add whatever you want. You know, it could be any synth, any type of synth, whatever. It's just that on this particular bass sound, I used 2 serums, but yeah, this one sort of higher, bit more gritty but cleaner layer. It sort of just helps pick out the higher frequencies. Just the one oscillator here, going through a high pass this time. Just cuts out a little bit of that bottom end to allow the other serum to come through a bit better. And we've got a bit of, well, it'll be the same. It's actually exactly the same settings that were in the other patch, because I just copied the patch, and it's the same LFO as well. So that's what we've got so far, but it's not particularly, it's alright, but it's not particularly exciting. This is where I add my secret weapon, which is this basically like a chain of stuff that I kind of made, I can't remember, for another tune, and saved it. That's one of the beauties of Bitwig. We can save this entire chain, or unlimited amounts of chains, or whatever you want. You can save that as one preset. I've actually called this bass fucker, because I think it's kind of an apt title. So at the moment you can see that's greyed out because it's turned off. If I activate it, it'll be on. So what that's done is it's kind of just accentuates the sound, and there's a bit of distortion and stuff like that. I'll go through it now. Kind of ignore this really. This is just, if you think about this is just like a carrier or a folder really for all these plugins. So this is the first plugin in the chain. This is a plugin called Gliss. So what I've done here is I've taken out the third harmony. Now I know that might seem like a weird thing to do, but actually taking the third harmony out of a bass is kind of it's a good thing to do, because what it does is it kind of increases the separation between the sub and the mid element. So it basically just, you don't really lose anything, but what you gain is you get a bit of space, and it's a good area to have some space around here. It's this around about the 200 hertz frequency, so that's probably roughly whereabouts your snare will be. You're talking about drum and bass anyway. So yeah, that helps to separate the bass and the mid basically. So now you may not hear a great deal of difference, but there is a difference, trust me. And the good thing about this Gliss EQ is that it's a dynamic EQ. So although dynamic EQs are kind of a bit of a head fuck really if you try and explain them. But the bottom line is that a normal EQ is always processing that sound all the time, whereas a dynamic EQ only does the equalization when that particular frequency appears. So it just basically means it gives you a kind of a better sound because it's not detracting from all the other frequencies of the sound. Because with any EQ, the minute you change something, what that does is it changes all the other frequencies as well. So if you add more bass to something, that's all well and good, but what that means is there's now less treble. So a dynamic EQ is less destructive in that way. So then that's going into another effects layer. Now, effects layer is a good it's another device in Bitwig, but it's a good one because what that means is from, you imagine going into here, we've got the sound, and then what it does is you can split off the sound as much as you want. You can carry on indefinitely if you want. So it's much like a send effect in other sequences or doors, but I prefer this because it's all contained within the channel. So what I've got here is I've got this tool. All this tool's doing is basically just a carrier for the original sound. So that is basically the clean, untouched version of every plugin up until this point in this chain. If we're going along horizontally as opposed to vertically, like some subsequences, or if we were to look on the channel, you can see that they're vertical. But so that's a clean, and then basically it's going through this other layer, which on its own sounds terrible. It's like incredibly distorted and it doesn't sound that great, but then when you mix that with the original sound, it kind of sounds alright. So that's going into a guitar rig. So it's just going through a couple of, or just one amp actually, a spring reverb, which I'm a big fan of spring reverbs. Obviously I played it, well, I played a guitar a little bit, not brilliantly, but I know what spring reverbs are back in the day. If you don't know, originally, you know, in the 50s and 60s and probably into the 70s before digital stuff came along, you know, reverb units were actually physical things, like you know, you had a plate reverb or you know, a chamber reverb, but they were actually, you know, it was actually a chamber, or it was actually a big metal plate, or in this case a spring reverb was actually a spring. The sounds bounced along the spring, and that's what gives it that thing, that kind of unique sound. But the reason I use a spring reverb on there is just to kind of like, I don't know, give it a bit more. You can hear when the bass sound stops, it gives you that nice kind of grungy tail. And it also kind of helps to set it back a bit from the original source, which is coming through anyway. And then that's just going into this Tweedman amp. Just sort of adds a little bit of distortion. This one I didn't end up using. And we just got a volume. Well, I suppose it's an emulation of a volume pedal, but just to bring the signal down a bit. So now these two are kind of become one, so to speak, here. If you can visualize that they're the two sources are now one, and they're going into this fab filter Saturn. Now I tend to find with this, it's kind of like it's a good thing to kind of use on quite a lot of things, Saturn, because it can kind of sort of help shape and control the sound a little bit, even without sort of going too mad. Like, there was another track I was working on the other day, and I used it on the drums, on the drum bus, just because just by kind of splitting it into the multi-band groups like we have here, because obviously this has been split into 4 groups, so we've got a group that's more so we've got four different frequency groups going from left to right, bass to treble, and yeah, it just adds a little not a great deal but it adds a certain je ne sais quoi. Then we're going into this Bitwig dynamics, which is just a compressor, but the good thing about this is it can do upwards and downwards compression. In this case it's just going down, but upwards compression can be a nice thing to use because it gives you that kind of hyped feel, but without actually getting rid of any of the transients, which is good. This is another secret weapon, really. If I take this off, you'll probably notice quite a difference. What this is, it's kind of like an homage to Ableton in a way. I don't know if any of you who use Ableton will probably know of the multiband dynamics plugin which they have in Ableton. I think it's called multiband dynamics or multiband compression or something. I can't really remember. But there's a setting on it called OTT, which is, I know, very popular. I know a lot of people use it because what it does is it gives you that instant gratification hype, and it just makes the sound more exciting, basically. And it's just all it is. It's just a combination of upwards and downwards compression. But there's also a plugin called OTT. If you're not using Bitwig or Ableton, it's by the guys who make Serum. It's called OTT, and it's by XFR Records, and it's very similar actually to the Ableton device. But for me, that one it is good. I've always struggled myself to kind of get it dialed in to the point where I'm happy with it, so I don't tend to use it. However, what I was actually speaking to Dom at Bitwig, and I suggested that they add something similar to OTT natively into Bitwig, because I know that a lot of people I know producers that will not leave Ableton because they don't want to lose the OTT. It's that important to their sound, so I suggested that they either included it or did anything, and actually what they did is actually made this preset called Hyper OTT using one of their own devices. This is actually this is called a multiband effects 3. There's two of these in Bitwig. You've got the multiband effects 2 and effects 3. The only difference really between them is FX2 is a 2-band split and FX3 is a 3-band split. What that means is it's splitting the signal into low, middle and high, or bass, mids and treble. And that's what this plugin is here. So now on each of these tabs we can have our own chain of an indefinite amount of plugins, whatever. whatever we decide. But in this case, all it's got is it's got 3 dynamics plugins, which are doing upwards and downwards compression. But what I did is I added in these tools, and all tools. The tool is it's just a Bitwig like utility plugin, which has got some basic functions like amplitude or volume and width. But in this case, I used it for the width. So what I did is on the bass or the low channel, I completely monoed that out, because obviously you want your low frequencies in mono as much as possible. And then on the mid, I kind of went halfway or 3/4 width, and then on the high, I just left it so that it's fully wide on the high end. And then as I play the sound, you'll see that these compressors reacting. What they're doing is they're individually compressing each of the low, middle, and highs. And again, well, if I was to put that up to 100%, well, you hear for yourself. So yeah, it's a bit full on if we use it all the way, but that's why I just use I took the mix and just using 21% worth, but I did put the bottom end a little bit to kind of get the sub to the point where I want it. Actually, just at this point, it's probably a good idea just to explain what I do on my master. As you can see, I've got an oscilloscope there, and that's one of the Bitwig plugins, which gives you a kind of idea of the level. So this is probably quite controversial, but it's a good little tip for you, or well, I think it's a great plugin, and I'm not entirely sure it's meant to do what I use it for, but fuck it, that's what I do. This is basically giving me 10 dB of extra output volume, but the great thing about this plugin is it basically does like hard clipping. As long as you select that clip setting there, it gives you it basically stops it brick wall limits stuff basically. So it's just the same as something like Ozone or T-Rex or any of those things do. But the trouble I find with all those, and I've got them all, but I don't tend to use them. The reason is, first of all, I'm a massive hater of latency. I don't like plugins that add latency into my DAW, because all that means is that it kind of slows things down, and then like when you want to play something on a keyboard, you've got to wait like half an hour for the note to play when you hit the keyboard, and that's no good really. So the good thing about this, it has no latency, but the other good thing about it is I find that it's one of the actually cleanest ways to maximize your tracks, because it's not compressing like in a musical way. All it's doing is basically just flattening off the top ends and squaring off the wave. I think it sounds less intrusive than something like Ozone or whatever, because Ozone, it's got that kind of the factor in the kind of musical compression to it, so it probably sounds maybe more natural, but for me it just doesn't cut the mustard anyway. So at the moment that's pushing everything up by 10 dB basically. What that means is that I don't have to go too hot on my individual channels. I can keep them at a reasonable volume without any redlining, and then I use this to boost up the master at the end. Obviously that figure may change depending on the track or whatever, but yeah, that's what it's set at the moment. And then I just have a couple of, I just have this this plugin just to keep an eye on the frequencies, so you can see my voice at the moment. But to give you an idea, if we look at the bottom end, I mean, certainly with drum and bass here on this particular analyzer, it's a little bit different from the default as well. It's I changed that setting from, I think it was like there, I put it up to 24. So to get the same results as me, you would have to do that, put it up to 24. But yeah, certainly with drum and bass and probably most dance music, really, in reality, the sub needs to be pretty much peaking on a line in between the 24 and the 12 there, so it's about halfway through. With this bass, you could probably say that the bottom end needs to come up a little bit, so I might just turn this up a bit. Yep, that's better. And just on my master, I've got this as well, which is all this is it's just a there's a few different ones. Again, it's made by the same people that make this Hornet. All it does is it gives you a readout of you know, the overall levels and average levels and all that sort of thing. So again, depending on the sort of style of music, like if you put a Calvin Harris track in here, the one I tend to look at is the short term LUFS, which is here. At the moment, obviously, there's no track playing, but if I was to play a normal drum and bass track, you're probably looking at for something about -5, and I think I've seen all the way up to about -2, and -2, I mean, it's extremely loud. But you know, some of these drum and bass producers are so good that they can, you know, they can get their tracks like insanely loud, but without actually them sounding terrible. I wouldn't put myself in that category. I'd say I get close, but probably not quite as good as some of the others guys. But yeah, so drum and bass, you're probably looking at anywhere between -5 and -5. Really, these days is quite low level, believe it or not. Up to about -2 at the real extremes. But then if you were to put like a Calvin Harris track or like, you know, something more radio, then it's probably about -7. And in reality, that's probably much more achievable. And it's probably better. It'd be better actually if all music was around that level, because it's just easier to work in the studio. But it's just how it is, really. So that's where I aim for. If I'm hitting 3 -3, I'm pretty happy, really. If I'm any higher than that, it's good, because you can bring the track down a bit, which is always good to, you know, so it's a bit less pushed. But one of the well, I'll tell you what, let's finish off this bass first. Right, so where are we off to? We're up to the multi-band compressor. We've done that. Okay, and then we're just going into another gliss. I think I just felt that there was a little bit too much low mid brought back in from all the other plugins, so I took that down a bit. Again, I'm using this Hornet track limiter as basically my hard limit. But what I've had to do is, obviously, because that's boosting it up, there's not that doesn't matter on the master, but for this particular thing, because we don't want the level to be too crazy, so it's so high that it clips the master. We want it to be a bit controlled. I've used this tool plugin to basically bring the level back down by a similar. It would either be the same or slightly more or slightly less, but if you look at the oscilloscope here, and I'll take these off, you can see right at the beginning, certainly at the beginning of the sound. Let me slow this down a bit. You see we've got quite high peak there. Now it's those sort of things that are going to kill your level. If you want aiming for a nice loud track, any of those little peaks and stuff, that's what's going to be what kills your level. So by adding these on, you can see it's basically just completely squared off the waveform. Now, I know in you know, if we're talking about high fidelity and dynamics and all that sort of thing, it's probably, you probably don't want to be squaring everything off. But if you're talking about dirty basses that you want to you know, you want to be able to use in a track and use successfully, then you do really need to kind of squash these things down. And I do think that they sound better as well, because it's just more kind of more controlled, and the squashy sound does have a certain something to it. It just, and it also will be a lot easier to use in your track. And then after all that, the final thing, what I found was when I was making this sound, if I just play it without this last plugin on, yeah, I was thinking there was just too much grit and treble going on. So what I just did, I just added this filter, which is a standard, which is just a Bitwig filter. It's a ladder filter, so it's based on the kind of Moog kind of things. And what I've done is I've automated the cutoff of the frequency, just to kind of follow the sound of the bass, but ultimately it's there just to kind of get rid of that fizzy top. But it just kind of brings it back a bit, makes it a little bit more controlled and a little bit more kind of palatable, I suppose. What I've done with this now, if I wanted, I could, in Bitwig, all I need to do is move that knob, and then it will come up. It will come up as a something that I can automate. So if I do that now, it's brought up the frequency here. So now if I were to draw in some automation, that would actually control that knob without any problems. But the one of the beauties of Bitwig is you've got all these different modulation options for any plugin, and that's any plugin, doesn't matter whether it's a Bitwig plugin or whatever, a third party plugin. And I use this macro controller, which is not dissimilar to, well, if any of you know Serum or Massive, then they've both got macro controllers, and it works exactly the same way, except the difference is with Bitwig it's system wide. So any plugin can be controlled in this fashion, and then all you need to do is you click on that, and then you select the amount that you want it to be modulated by. And now that knob is controlling the frequency. The reason I do it with that rather than just automating that knob directly is that I may want to control other things with this one knob as well. So I may want to control the resonance as well. I may want to control the output, so that when it's filtering and it's heavily resonant, it brings the output down so that it's more on level. But forgetting that for the moment, this one's the one I already set up, and as you can see on this automation lane here, that's controlling that basically. And I've got one other modulation going on here, which I think is the pitch of the plugin. So that's going to macro 1 of Serum. And if we have a look on the automation page, yeah, that's going to the master tune. So what that's doing is basically just, it's like a pitch bend, but I'd rather use the macro rather than the pitch bend, because again, if I want to assign it to something else, I can do without problems. That's one of my favourite things to do actually in Serum, is to modulate the master tune in some way, because you can get some sort of cool sounds, and giving a little bend to a sound, whether it's at the start or the end, it just kind of makes it come alive rather than it being static. So alright, that's pretty much that bass sound. Have you got any got any questions? Fire away if you do. I think someone else was asking me about leads and stuff like that. Let me just see these questions. Just chat amongst yourselves for a minute. Yeah, I'm in the just reading through these at the moment. Yeah, that's quite a lot. That's quite a lot of questions. Yeah, do I have a resample? Sometimes I do. I'm not really a massive fan of resampling myself, just because I just can't handle the commitment. I'm a bit of a commitment phobe. So what I tend to do, what like if we're talking about this, bass sound, for example. So like, say I was happy with this. What I would generally do is I would bounce that into so what I've done is I've bounced that, because I've not bounced it in place. I've done a separate bounce. So what that means is that it's bounced with all the plugins on. So I can now get rid of that, and that's no longer chewing up my processor. And I've got, so that's now at one sample. So as much as I say I don't do resampling, in a way I do, but I just don't do it necessarily in the same way using samplers and stuff. But now I've got the sample. One of the benefits of doing it like this is we've got this little bit at the end, which, say if I had another bass happening directly after this one, another one coming in there, I might not necessarily want that tail on there, so I can get rid of that and give it a nice fade at the end. And probably make the fade a little bit longer. But yeah, one of the nice things I like about Bitwig is I can actually, it's kind of like the audio is like a sampler in a way anyway. So say I wanted to do a pitch bend on this, all I need to do is select a time stretch algorithm, in which case I'll probably use this one because it's the best one. So now if I wanted to do a pitch bend, I can so yeah, it's kind of like having it in a sampler anyway. So what I would do is so yeah, it's pretty solid time stretching. So I would probably just do what I would have done in a sampler, but in audio. If you get my meaning. Okay, next one. Keep the questions coming, guys, and I'll work my way through them. How would you go about adding a sub to that bass line with its pitch automation, or would you run a sub out of dedicated serum track? Yeah, that's a good question. It's a tricky one, because having a separate sub it 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 gives you a lot more control, but I also think sometimes it can actually give you more problems as well, because what you've got to do is you've got to clear some of the bottom end out of whatever mid sample you're using with the sub, and I tend to find that you will always end up sacrificing a little bit of the mid sound to be able to fit the sub in. But it does very much depend on the track. With something like this, I'll be inclined to try and just use the sub as it is, but then you do some do some specific side chaining so that it clears the drums, or preferably no side chaining at all if possible, but it doesn't always work out like that. But if you can get the sort of the right sounding drums in the right frequency zones, then you can kind of almost avoid the side chaining, or certainly just have a little bit of side chaining rather than it being like completely noticeable. But I think you find a lot in drum and bass, certainly a lot of the producers will just use bass sounds that are kind of all in one, as opposed to having separate sub elements. It just, I don't know, for some reason it always just seems a bit easier to fit them in a track. That's just my take on it. I mean, I have done plenty of tracks where I'm using a separate sub. Again, it just depends on what you're doing and how you want it to pan out. But certainly, yeah, having a separate sub does help a lot. I know. See, this one of the nice things with Bitwig is sometimes I would the main ways I would do the side chaining is normally I would either use the Bitwig Dynamics, which is it's just a traditional side chain in as much as you would set the input here. So say if you wanted to side chain it to your kick, that would be your input, and then you set your threshold and stuff, and it would just duck down. But what that does is it basically takes the whole volume and moves it down, which sometimes works, sometimes others. And then another alternative to that is this thing called Track Spacer, which is pretty good. Again, it'd be similar thing. You send the input of whatever you want to side chain in here, and then this is slightly better because what it does is it just ducks the frequencies of the specific things that you're side chaining rather than all of the frequencies. But then if you want to get like super nerdy, you could I've done this in the past as well. Like you take something like Pro 2, and I actually find that this is probably one of the best ways. So like say for example, you know your kicks, or you can look at your kick and you see that it's coming in around about 100 hertz, and maybe your snare's coming in at like 200. And then what you can do is actually create. Now I don't believe that you can do this in any other DAW, but I can add these macros. So I can take a side chain macro, and I set my input, so that would be like the kick or something, and then I assign this to the volume to the band gain. So what that means is every time the snare triggers, it will pop down that specific frequency. Every time the kick triggers, it will pop down that specific frequency. So what that means is it's not touching the rest of your frequencies all the time. So it just basically sounds clearer. Do you use reference tracks for mastering or even arrangements? Sometimes I compare my songs to reference tracks and always think my mix downs are bad. It puts me off finishing stuff. Yep, I can identify with that. I think everyone feels that. Everyone I know, they'll always say, "Oh, for fuck's sake!" Like I was doing this track and then I put this other one on and I was like, "Oh, for fuck's sake, it's killed it." But honestly, that is one of the best things you can do, to constantly reference your track against someone else's, because it it negates a lot of problems. For instance, like say if your room or your speakers, are not quite it, not quite up to par. I mean, my room's, it's not brilliant acoustically. I've got all right speakers. Then they're not, they're just, I've got Focal CMS 65s. They're probably slightly, slightly above average. I've got a CMS sub, which is nice as well. But yeah, it's not amazing. But I know that I can listen to some other tracks, and like if they sound all right to me in here, then that's probably all right. But yeah, absolutely. Really, the more you can reference stuff, the better. But you just got to be mindful that if you reference stuff, there's no point referencing stuff against stuff that's completely different or completely, all right. If it's take drum and bass for example, there's no point referencing hazard track if you want to sound like a noisy track. Do you know what I mean? It's just, or there's no point, or vice versa, because they're two completely different styles. Not one's neither right nor the other. They're both brilliant, but yeah, you just need to make sure that if you're referencing a track, it's got to be something that's similar to the vibe of the track you're working on. But the main problem is once you've gone down a route with a track, you could. I mean, this happens to me all the time. You're doing it for a while, and you think, oh yeah, this sounds all right, and then you put on another track, and you're like, oh for fuck's sake, this now sounds shit. Whereas if you reference to a track constantly throughout the process, then once you've established, all the right elements, like got the drum sounding right and stuff like that, then the rest of your track will be a breeze, and you probably won't need to reference too much until perhaps the end, when you just give it a final once over. But yeah, it's easy to go down the wrong path for sure, and that's why it's a good idea to reference stuff. And there's nothing wrong with it at all. Everyone does it, and believe me, everyone does it. So, do I use track space for that? Have you managed to use to create? Yeah, I have. I have done dynamic EQs, like I was kind of explaining with the use this kind of like a dynamic EQ really. But yeah, you can do all that, no problem at all. And do I work anything into my master? Yeah, see, this is a thing. Like again, there's a difference between the conventional wisdom and what you should be doing in practicality. Now, like maybe 10-15 years ago, you probably didn't really need to worry about your master that much, because tracks weren't really, there wasn't a massive sort of it's kind of like a status symbol really, volume. It's like the bottom line is no one likes a quiet track, and if you're DJing out and you've got a track that's like smashing it and it's loud, and then you mix in another track and it's all right. You have got gains on one, on the mixers and stuff like that, but it's not always that easy in the heat at the moment to deal with these things. So it's always a bit of a disappointment when you put on a track and it's like a little bit, even if it's like 1 or 2 dB quieter, it is noticeable. And obviously the louder it is, especially in a club, it's going to be more noticeable. So I think majority of producers these days work into the master. So like I explained earlier with my mastering chain, I've always got this on. That's why I like this one in particular. Apart from the fact I think it sounds really good, it's virtually uses no processor at all, but it still gives you what you need, and gives you an idea of how the track's going to sound. Because this is the other thing as well. If you get, for argument's sake, if you got all your drums and they're all sounding banging, yeah, and then you go and stick some sort of maximization on it, that will change the sound of it. So what you'll find is that your probably drums are hitting too hard now, because you've got them sounding really cool and hard and fat and whatever before you've put the mastering stuff on, and then when you put the mastering stuff on, it's too much going into it. It's going to be like overkill. So, but if you've already worked into that master and your drums are already going into that master, then they've already kind of got that squashed side. And this is what I find: if I take this master off, everything sounds a bit shit, to be honest, because it's been designed with using that master in mind. So yeah, that's my advice, is to work into the master if you can get hold of this plugin. I don't think it's expensive. It was a while ago that I got it, so I can't really remember, but I think it's a pretty cheap one, or it might even be free, I'm not sure, but yeah, that's a good one to use, and I definitely recommend working into the master. So go on, keep. I'm just going to go and grab a bottle of water. Keep the questions coming if you've got any more. I'll be back in 1 sec. Okay, processors making drums sounding good. Use parallel compression. Don't know. It depends very much on the type of things. Yeah, I do sometimes use parallel compression. That's definitely a good thing to use. Not always parallel compression as well. I mean. Let me just see if I can find an example. I had my 6-year-old daughter in the studio yesterday. Actually, she wanted to sing a song, so I recorded her. She's actually pretty good at singing for a 6-year-old. Yeah, see what I'm about to do here, you'll see in a sec. This is one of the really nice things about Bitwig, is I can basically just drag. I've got a drum folder here. The good thing about Bitwig is basically a folder is also your routing. So as you see here, this is not only just it makes it nice and nice arrangement and easy on the eye. These are actually sort of subgroups, and then this is like the main group. So if you imagine this is the main drum bus, and then you've got 3 separate drum buses, and then within those I may have other buses as well. But yeah, if you watch what I'm about to do, I'm going to drag this whole section into this other arrangement here, and what that will do, it will copy. Oh, hang on a sec. Yep. Sorry, bear with me 1 sec. Hello. Right, that's better. Yeah. All it is my computer's a bit old, and it has to do a lot of extra work to do this stream as well as doing this. So it's not doing too badly, but yeah, that's why there's a few glitches and stuff. But yeah, so that's now copied everything across from that other arrangement, which is nice, because if you've you know, you say you did some drums in like this is another thing a lot of people won't tell you, but this happens a lot. Most tunes are made up out of elements from failed tunes, if you get me. So to say maybe to do one good tune, you might have to do 3 or 4 shit ones or ones that you're not happy with. But with in those, there may be elements like there might be an intro from one or drums from another or whatever. So yeah, that's brilliant from this point of view because you can just drag stuff across like really easily. So yeah, these drums. Let's have a listen. They're probably not sounding quite right because I won't have the same. Actually, let me just recreate the same settings. One sec. I just got to just switch on the arrangement just to find out what the. Actually, no, I can just copy that. Oh, you can also do that with plugins as well. So what I've done is I've just copied the exact same thing, and you can see I had 15 dB rather than 10 as I had it set up on this arrangement. Yeah, so that's the drums. So yeah, we've got these different groups. So we've got kick and snare. So what I did with these is there's a few different layers going on. Now what I tend to find, especially with drum and bass drums, I mean you could probably apply this to all of them, is it's definitely layering is the secret without doubt. You're never going to go out and find the perfect snare sample, the perfect kick sample, or whatever. It's not going to happen because none of the producers that are making the stuff that you like, there isn't, you just can't find this stuff. So like I think that what you want to do is you want to layer up elements to make it, but that you've got to be mindful of. There's no point just layering up the same stuff. So there's no point putting 3 snares that all sound similar together. What you want to have like different things to kind of make up the sound. But anyway, you'll see what I mean. So like with this one, like the first snare I chose was this just very basic but kind of weighty snare, like a live snare. Right, hang on. So let me just explain again. I've used this instrument layer as I did before with the serums, but this time I've just used the Bitwig samplers, which is just a little utility sampler. So yeah, one sec. Right, so yeah, right. So that's our snare. So this is the first one. So yeah, as you can hear, it's all right, but it's not particularly exciting. Got this one. So that's given us the kind of snap at the beginning, which is it's always good to have. Then we've got a clap. Again, sounds shit on its own, but certainly works with it. And then a hat, which is just this sort of live hat. But obviously, put them all together. I mean, they all sound shit on their own, but together they kind of look alright. They sound alright. And then I don't. Yeah, we got going on here then. Right, so each of these samplers basically has its own channel, so to speak, coming off of it. So Yeah, so I haven't really done anything anything in particular, just this general EQ, and I just use this Bitwig one just to, really it doesn't make a lot of difference, but I just wanted to sort of cut off a bit of the bottom end, bring down a little bit of the resonance of the snare, just to smooth it out a bit. The kick's got a similar process, although because with a kick it's not really, you can tend to do more harm, I find, by layering stuff than you know than not. I actually, this kick was kind of one I made myself, which was, I think it was a kind of a layer of 2 or 3 kicks from a sample pack, if I remember, and then I added this kind of live sounding layer. Just to sort of give it a little bit of width towards the high end, and a little bit more kind of, I suppose, excitement. And you can see that this one has its own EQ, because that's straight after the sampler. That EQ is only affecting this sampler here, which is the higher kick, and then this one is actually going straight out into the last EQ. So they're both, so one of them's going through this one, but they're both going through this one. Again, just took out a little bit at the bottom end, boosted up the around about the 100 hertz mark a little bit, and yeah, that's pretty much that. And then I think I just added this. Just this little just another hi-hat, really, just to give it a bit of a tail. Alright, let me just well, I'm going to be waffling on. I need to make sure I'm answering your questions. So yeah, no, I agree. I think making drum hits with synths is a good way to go, because the good thing is it's kind of completely unique, because no one else has got that sample or whatever, because you've made it, and B, you are maintaining the quality. See, now this is one of the big things about making music that I find, is you can spend all day EQing stuff, compressing stuff, doing whatever to it, but you're better off spending that time looking for the right thing in the first place, rather than trying to take the wrong thing and trying to make it right. It'll always be better just to have you know, the find the perfect sample, if possible, or whatever, in the first place. And obviously creating your own or making your own drum hits, that is a great way to do that, because you're ensuring. So now, you know, a lot of the sample CDs now, I would say the majority, I mean, I've got, if I'll show you my sample library, I mean, this is 24 years worth, so it's quite large. See, normally this would be on the other screen, but yeah, this is my sample library. So yeah, it's quite a few bits there. These are probably my best ones, because these are the ones these are like my personal ones that I've collected. You know, like with these go all the way back to '94. You know, got all the breaks. So yeah, but the point I was trying to make about sample CDs is you get a lot of shit samples, basically. You know, like a lot of the sample CDs samples, a lot of them, they just rip stuff off of other tracks or vinyl or whatever. And by the time you get them, I kind of call them second-hand samples. They just haven't got that that solidness and the niceness of a 100% original sample. So yeah, definitely making your own drum hits is a good way to go. There's a lot of time and error, trial and error. That's the only trouble, but I think it's worth spending the time on for sure. Right, so what sort of processing do I do on my drums? Well, I'll just go through the individual channels first, and then I'll show you the overall main drum bus. So with this, we've got a second. Right, yeah, we've got the second bus here, which is I did have more stuff, but it was just a hi-hat basically. I think I had an open one. I did have that noise as well, just to, all that is just white noise, and I've basically put like a audio fade to give it that kind of sucky motion, but I think I got rid of that in the end. So it was kind of like interfering with everything else. So on this particular one, all I did is added this upwards compression, which now, because it's just got the one hi-hat, it's not really doing that much, but I'll show you on the other bus. You'll see that it's doing more. So this is kind of like the rest of the stuff. So yeah, on this one, if I take this plugin off, it doesn't really sound like it's doing much, but there was a reason I put it on there, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, you can tell it's basically it's smoothing everything out, which is what I wanted really. If I turn this up a bit more, you'll hear the effect more. What that's doing is it's basically doing upwards compression, which means it's, instead of controlling the hits like a normal downward compression does, so instead of taking stuff off the front of the hit, it actually pushes up the back of the hit. So it kind of just gives it a kind of more hyped and exciting feel. So that was actually a loop out of a track of mine called Making Noise, which is actually, I think it's like a Superior Drummer loop that I've programmed, and then I bounced it in the last track, and then I thought it sounded good in this track, but it's not. I took out the snares because they were kind of conflicting with the actual main snare. Just got a bit of Amen there, which is in the sampler, and then just hats, shakers, that kind of thing. So what's going on the main drum bus? So I'll play it without all the plugins. You'll hopefully hear the difference. Yeah, all those plugins do really. They just kind of solidify, like, what's the word? Glue. Yeah, they kind of just glue it so it sounds a bit more cohesive. So it's like one thing rather than loads of different elements. But on this one, this is what I was saying earlier about this Saturn. It's not really doing anything. There's a little bit of like adjustment in using this dynamics, but on the whole, it's not really doing anything. But it does make a difference. Got this Now I wouldn't normally do this, but on these particular drums, I just felt that sort of bottom end needed to come up on all of them. So that's what I've done. I've just done like a low shelf just to bring up the bottom end a bit. This is always quite a good thing to do. Take out 500 hertz frequencies, or the 500 hertz frequency. For some reason, it just kind of like makes the drum sound a bit better. I'll see if I can demonstrate. Very subtle. It just takes out a bit of the boxiness sound. It just makes them sound a bit smoother. Again, we're using this with the. So what I've done is I've boosted it up by 7, and then I brought it down by 6. That would have started off at 7, but I've obviously felt that they needed to come up a little bit. So if we look at this oscilloscope. So without that on, you're getting more peaks, which again, that will harm your overall level. You know, there's a debate about dynamics and stuff like that, but I still think the dynamics are coming through. It's just a bit more controlled, and it's obviously going to be easier to get a higher level at the end because you know, the drums are already contained, so to speak. But yeah, just on this particular example, I've not done much, but to give you an example of other things you can do. So this is one of the things I really like about Bitwig is we can use this layer thing, which instead of having to mess around with sends and all that nonsense. See, I hate doing that because certainly in things like Cubase and probably Logic and probably Ableton as well, by the time you're sending off sends, you're then sending that sound to a particular different part. Now, where does that send go? Does that send go back into the bus? Is it just loose and coming out of the main master? These are all the things that sort of play on my mind, and this is why I like it to have it all contained, until I know that all this stuff is going to this output and that it's not going anywhere else or anything like that. So normally this effects layer doesn't have this tool built into it. I've added it in and made my own default preset. So actually nothing would happen if you just put that plugin on there by itself, but because I've got this tool, it's already created a direct through, so to speak. Now, the keener view probably will have noticed that there's a bit of digital clipping going on there, so I would actually address that if I mute all these plugins. Yeah, we can see that it's coming in a little bit too hot from the individual channels, so I would adjust that, but for now it doesn't really make a lot of difference. So yeah, I mean, like, so if we add another layer, we're effectively adding a parallel layer. So that's what someone was asking about. So like one of the oldest tricks in the book is the New York parallel compression. So what that normally is, it's like an extreme compression mixed in with the original signal. So obviously that compression, that's far too extreme. It's completely killed all the dynamics. But if we mix that back in, so that's without it. Then that's with it. Now that's probably a little bit over the top, but just to give an example, it basically just kind of hypes out the sound and makes it sound more exciting. But I mean, the sky's the limit, because you know, you could another thing I sometimes do is add a bit of distortion or something. only thing is you got to watch phasing, but. So again, yeah, it adds a certain something. And this is kind of one of the kind of things to know about music. There's a kind of like a little bit of voodoo and a little bit of magic that kind of goes on behind the scenes in music production, in so much as there's things in there that you may not even know are in there, but if they're not in there, you would know that they weren't in there. If you get me, I know that sounds confusing, but it's the subtle little things that kind of can make a lot of the difference. And like if you heard that beat, you'd probably never think, oh, he must have added a guitar rig on a parallel compression there. You know what I mean? It's like you, as far as you're concerned, one just hears it as a beat. But that is the what kind of separates the men from the boys. It's all these little things, and yeah, I mean, it's really just a sort of limit of your imagination, really. I mean, yeah, hi to the USA. Nice to have some of our American cousins locked in. Yeah, that's the thing. It's sometimes because when I first started, the very first setup I had was an Atari ST running eMagic Notator, which was a nightmare. And I had an Akai SO1, which you probably never heard of, but it was like their most budget sampler. It was still like 700 quid at the time, which is probably more like about 1,200 quid, £1,200 now. But it had 7 second sampling time. That was it, and you could only have 8 samples, I think. So you could have 8 samples, and you had 7 seconds of sampling time across those 8 different samples. So it was pretty restrictive, to say the least. And then when I first went into a proper studio, and then slightly later when I got my own studio, we had a little bit more, but it wasn't a great deal more. But in a way, it's kind of like not such a bad thing to write music in that way, because the restrictions, it means you're not constantly fucking around with shit all the time, and that is the only trouble with having pretty much unlimited power, unlimited plugins, unlimited samples, is that you can spend a lot of time, deciding what you want to use rather than actually just getting on and use it. And at the end of the day, I think it's good to try and crack on with a track as much as you can, as quickly as you can, because the longer you work on it, the sicker you're going to get at that track. And I think once I know from myself, after a couple of days, I've normally pretty much had enough of a track, and that's not a good place to be. You don't want to be sick of your own music already, you know what I mean? So it's a good idea to try and get as much stuff done, and then maybe go back and refine stuff there. So as much as it's tempting to, like if I want to find a hi-hat, I type in hi-hat, and I've got like ridiculous. Normally gives the figure, but it's a lot. Put it that way. Hang on. No, it must have changed it, but it used to give the figure, but it's like hundreds of thousands. It's just ridiculous, and you're never going to be able to sit there and listen through 100,000 hats, nor should you. So the trick is, I think, to try and get as much stuff done as possible, and then at the end, well, when you're mixing it down and you're done with the kind of creative process, that would be the time to go back and maybe look at changing things or whatever if you're not happy with them. And it also doesn't really hurt to have a kind of a little bit of certain things that you use. Again, I mean, if you find hi-hats or rides that you're happy with, the difference that they're gonna make choosing a different sample, it's gonna be so minimal. It's not even worth it. So if you find stuff that you like, stick with it. If it works for you, it's always a good idea to stick with it, and it's just going to save you a lot of time, because I'm sure most of you know, like when you're in the studio making music, time changes completely. Like I'm sure you've all been on a plane where you're flying for 2 hours and it seems like it's forever, but then when you're working in the studio, you can, you look at your clock 1 minute and then 12 hours later it feels like a second. So it's good to try and get as much stuff done as possible, but keep those questions coming, because that's what it's all about today. But yeah, it's so nice to be able to keep everything just in a folder like that. And one of the other things I kind of like to do in Bitwig, I've not really done enough of this, but I should probably do a bit more, is you can kind of like design your own like effects and stuff like that. So I'll give you an example. One probably won't sound that good on here, but it's a bit of fun anyway. I think the second one was a bit better. Yeah, it's a bit distorted, this one, but you get the idea. So with that, this one, it's basically, yeah, I'm using that macro to like modulate quite a few things. As you can hopefully see, if I turn this knob here, it's changing, like it's changing that setting. It's changing that set, the width of the reverb, the mix of the reverb, and this pitch shifter as well. That's what's giving it that effect. Yeah, so that's quite fun. This is quite a good distortion plugin. It's quite nice. Need to mess around with it a bit though to get it sounding good, but it's pretty good. But yeah, come on, let's have some more questions. Don't be shy. That's what today's all about. So otherwise I'll just be waffling on for hours about nothing. I was actually checking out this mix. This is like a DJ mix I did in like, about 2011 or something. But it was kind of nice. Nice to hear a lot of those tunes. I've kind of forgotten about them actually. How do you go about starting a track? Yeah, that's always a good question. I can tell you the best way to start a track, and then I can tell you how I often start a track the most, and then I can tell you not a good way to start the track. The best way to start a track is to have a clear idea of what you want to do. That is without doubt the best way of doing it. If you know exactly what you want to do from start to finish, then that would be the easiest track you've ever written. But that doesn't often work like that. Well, it doesn't for me anyway, but probably other people are different. I know, like, I don't know if you're all familiar with a guy called Silent, who he's done some drum and bass in the past, but probably better known for dubstep. He also does a lot of streaming on Twitch, actually. He's quite prolific at that. But he's really incredibly talented producer, and I'm sure I spoke to him, and he was saying that basically, like, when he goes into the studio, he knows the entire track is written in his head. Do you know what I mean? Before he goes in, which is it's pretty amazing. If you know, that's a pretty amazing thing to do. That would be the best way to start a track, without doubt. The second option is, I always find that if you need like some sort of spark to get rolling with a track, like, and the spark really could be anything. I mean, a more obvious one would be, you know, if you're working on a track with a vocal, or you're doing a remix or something like that, then obviously that's a great place, because you know that already gives you your kind of parameters for starting the track, and obviously you've got to use the vocal if you're doing a remix or whatever. But if you're talking about, you know, completely original stuff that you do yourself, then, you know, it could be anything. And it's funny how things pan out. Like for instance, it could be you do some drums that you just completely vibe into, and it kind of the whole track kind of goes from there. Or it could be like an effect sample, a vocal sample, or a little bit of music or something like that. Yeah, I always think if you've got that spark, that kind of really helps you along the way. And then the third way, and the least sensible option, is basically, and this is what I do a lot of the time, probably too much, is basically just sitting there and trying to come up with stuff, which is not always that easy, and can be quite soul destroying. Because, you know, there'll be times when you sit there and you come up with something straight away, and there'll be other times when you sat there for 2 or 3 days and nothing happens, and that does happen to everyone at some point. It's nothing, as much as it's easy to say it's nothing to worry about, it's not something you should get worried about, but obviously you do get worried about it, because it's like one of those things. Yeah, you have a bad day, and then that feeds into another bad day, and blah blah blah. But without doubt, if you want to get on and get tracks done and finished, have a clear idea of what you want to do from pretty much start to finish. Have an idea of the drum sounds that you want to use, the bass sounds you want to use, the melodies you want to use. And that will definitely help you and get you finished. And also, another good thing to do is always try and finish a track. Obviously, there'll be times where you're just like, you know, you might be doing something and you thought it was good, and then you load it up the next day and it's like, oh shit. Or sometimes it works the other way around, where you're doing something you weren't that sure about, and then you load it up the next day and it sounds good. But yeah, the bottom line is, if you've got a clear idea of what you're going to do, it's always a lot easier. And to be fair, probably all the best tracks that I've done, have been that situation where you've got a clear idea of what you want to do. Right, let's have another look at some other questions. Keep your questions coming, guys, because we can work through them, and it's a lot more interesting than me just sitting there talking shit. Hey, maybe this is a really common question, and somebody probably already asked this before, but I really struggle with finishing tracks. Really hyped about one track I work on, then after I feel like I've lost it and start something else, and end up with tons of unfinished stuff. Yep. Well, I kind of answered that, but yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, and I'm the same. Probably most people are the same. You know, there's a certain excitement about starting a new track, without doubt, because you're kind of one sec, kind of wiping the slate clean and starting again, and it's all nice and new and blah blah blah. But the bottom line is, the more you listen to a track, the more accustomed you come to it. And I liken it very much to, if any of you cook, I'm sure you all know that really it's never as nice cooking for yourself as it is being cooked for. If you're talking about the same quality of food, obviously. It's simple, because you knew exactly what went into making that dish, whereas the person who's eating it or receiving that dish, it's all fresh to them and it's the first time they've heard it or tried it. And if you think of everyone who hears your music as the person who's eating the dish, and then you're the chef, it kind of goes some way to explain the feeling. And I can completely identify with what Overlord has said, because you're absolutely right. But you've got to remember that you have heard it a million times before, and you've got to try and think back to that initial buzz that you had at the beginning. And as long as you're honest with yourself and you say, you know, if you look back and you think, yeah, I was just off my head, like I don't even know why I like that, then that's one thing. But if you were sort of into the idea in the first place, then there must have been a good reason why you were. So it's probably worth kind of gritting your teeth and going back to it. Or the other thing you can do is just go and do something else for a while. Sometimes different genres really help as well. I mean, if any of you know my history, you'll know that I've done a few different genres, and so sometimes I'll just do like some weird random track, like I don't know, something completely different, just because it sort of breaks up a bit. And I think every time you do that, you learn as well. So what I would say, if you do have trouble finishing tracks, have a break from them, go back to them, be honest with yourself, just say, really, is this good, is it not? If it's good, it's worth going back to and finishing. If it's not, just leave it, move on, try something else. But you know, quite often you will go back to things and you'll think, oh, actually, this is pretty good. But one thing I do tend to find is you only really get a true idea of your own music after a number of years have passed, and you've written another, a lot more other song tracks afterwards. Like I just happened to listen to a old track of mine called Echoes the other day, and I was like thinking, yeah, this is actually all right. This track, it's not too bad. Whereas, like, you know, a lot of people said that they liked it, but I was always like, you sure? Like, yeah, I don't know, because you know what's wrong with your track, whereas everyone else who hears it, just as much as the chef knows that he may have dropped a bit of meat on the floor but stuck it in the pan anyway, you know, observe the 3-second rule or whatever. He knows that, but the person eating the dish doesn't know that, and that's a kind of important thing to remember. Right, what else? What do you tend to start with first? Drums, intro? Do you work an intro from a fleshed out tune idea, or vice versa? Again, you know, it's very much probably a combination of all those things. Sometimes, I mean, drums is a good place to start, without doubt, with electronic music, because I can tell you now, if your tune sounds shit, it's probably the drums. And not only that, it's probably the snare. If you're talking about drum and bass, it's probably the snare that's causing you problems. You wouldn't believe the amount of difference good drums versus bad drums are. You know, it's just such a crucial thing for any dance music, house, whatever, drum and bass, hardcore, whatever you want. If the drums aren't sounding right, the whole tune won't sound right. It's just the fact. So it's probably worth spending a lot of time getting your drums sounding right. You've got to make sure they're hitting at the right frequencies. You know, the dynamics are there, that they sound glued together. And if you do have them sounding right, that makes a big difference. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to start a track like that. I know a lot of people do. Excuse me. So I think it kind of helps establish a vibe for the track. But probably like with Echoes, like we're talking about Echoes, I'll be honest, my inspiration for that was sorry, hang on one sec. Yeah, my inspiration for that was the bell tune, which was on, I think it was Invisible Man on Good Looking Records, and I just wanted to do something like that really, and I kind of found this bell sound which was on the Atmosphere, which I kind of really liked, and I don't know, I think it was me. I was trying to, in a way, kind of recreate that original bell sound in that Invisible Man tune, and then I kind of just stumbled across what happened. So that with that track, it was very much it was just, I wouldn't say a fluke, but there's an element of luck, and it was just like happened to press the right keys at the right time, and it made something that sounded alright. And then I kind of did a few things where I lay it like I put the same pattern like an octave up, but I made the speed half, so it played it twice as fast as octave up, and then I tried doing the same thing but making it twice as long with an octave lower, and then I had about 2 or 3 sort of bell parts that were all kind of like reacting with each other, and it kind of produced that sound. And yeah, that, and then like the whole track just went from there basically. So it's certainly with me, I don't know if it's like the same for everyone else, but I think if you've got something that you need to find something that you get excited about, and then once you're excited about it, all the right switches turn on in your brain, and all the right, everything gets going. So if you're excited about your drums, you're going to be more excited about writing a bass, or if you're excited about this bass sound you made, or this bell pattern, or this vocal that you've got, all those things will help you progress in a tune. There's nothing worse than sitting in front of an empty screen with nothing in it, where if you just press play, it's just going to press play for forever and nothing's going to happen. That versus you've already got like a nice melody or a nice vocal, or just that something just to get yourself excited. And trust me, when you've been doing this as long as I have, which is 24 years this year, it's so hard to get excited about anything, because literally the amount of days and hours you spent sitting in the same place looking at the same things, hearing the same shit, and all the same samples and blah blah blah, and you're like, oh, that again. So it does make it harder, but I suppose in a way it gives you an advantage, because you're probably gonna maybe find things that people haven't heard or get excited about. But yeah, let's have a look at a few more questions. So we've done that one. Any tips for making hectic or speedy sounding drums? Think that's funny, you just asked a question about Heist and he literally just texted me. Think Ella, some jump up tracks such as Heist for example, I tend to try and cram a bunch of different sounds and it just gets messy instead of all meshing and flowing good. Perhaps I'm not focusing on the right aspects. Apologies for the vague, difficult question. No, I wouldn't say it's vague at all. I know what you mean. It's very easy to add stuff kind of gratuitously, if you know what I mean. The point is, everything that you need to add, it needs to serve a purpose, and sometimes it may even be as it's not even really serving a purpose, but the purpose is if you took it out, it doesn't sound as good. So it doesn't have to be a blatant purpose, but it just has to have a purpose. But there is absolutely nothing wrong with cramming a load of stuff in, or putting as much as you want in and then stripping it back. That's not a bad way of working at all. But honestly, it's just one of those things. It's like practice makes perfect. Like all these guys that, and I don't put myself in this category, because I look up to pretty much the entire drum and bass scene, because like to me they are the best producers in the world, without doubt, best electronic producers in the world, and half of them don't even know it, which is which is even scary. But these guys, they're like the top edge of electronic music production, above and beyond any other genre. No disrespect to any other genre, but certainly they really are high up there, and but I can guarantee that none of them started sounding off as good as they did, and the only way that they got there is just through practice, keep going, and it's all about finding what works for you as well. That's an important thing, because as much as there's like, I mean, when I first started, there was no information at all, nothing. The only thing you had was Sound on Sound magazine, and that was pretty much geared up to traditional forms of recording music, like bands and stuff like that. By the way, keep the questions coming, because then I can work around to them. So there was nothing out there. So you had to find your own way. I was, obviously, as you kind of make your way into the to the game, so to speak, then you do get the odd tip and trick from here and there. But you always have to be very careful with second-hand information, especially even what I'm saying today, or stuff that you've watched on a YouTube tutorial, or even like a masterclass with an established producer, because what you're not getting the whole, it's not the whole truth. You're not getting the whole story, basically. So they'll say that they did something or this particular thing, but it's not necessarily giving you the entire picture. So it can be actually quite misleading, and kind of you can actually end up going on the wrong path. So the main thing is you've got to kind of always play your own game, so to speak, and never worry about whether it's the right thing or not, because really there is no right thing at all, because there were people that thought they were doing the right thing 10 years ago, and then someone comes along who has just done a load of things that are completely like against the grain or the conventional wisdom, but it works. And and then everyone's saying, oh well, like how's this happened, do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's important you just got to keep going, keep working at it, keep trying stuff, and then one day it will just click and you'll be like, okay, right, now I understand how I do my thing. And it's it's important to remember, just don't get consumed with the way anyone else does anything, because that's what works for them. It isn't necessarily what works for you. And it is really just a case of putting in the hours and working hard at it. I'm afraid it's not an easy thing to do, to make music. It's not an easy thing to make average or okay music, and it's certainly not an easy thing to make really good music. That's one of the hardest things in the world, and there's really only a handful of people in the world that can do it. But I can guarantee that anyone that does has spent a lot of time working very, very hard on it to get there. Once you've finished the song and you think it's good enough, what ways do you promote it? Is it best to be with a record label? Okay, well, that's a great question, actually, because the things change, and what was good 5 or 10 years ago might not be so good now. Traditionally, being with a record label, or certainly a established or well-known record label, was without doubt the way to go, because what you're doing is you basically, their network is promoting you pretty much. So certainly back in the day, if we're talking about the vinyl days or whatever, there was no way you were putting out music without being on a record label. 10 years ago, you could still put out music yourself, but I think it was advantageous being with a big record label. Now, I honestly think you're probably better off keeping your independence and just trying to promote it yourself, because as much as it's hard to do that, and it's very hard to get noticed, if you do get noticed, the benefits will well outweigh the the cons, because the problem with being with the bigger label is things are always going to be slower for a start, because you know, like say me with Ram, if I said, right, here's a tune tomorrow, and they liked it, it's not going to come out for probably at least 3 months minimum. Do you know what I mean? Because it's just how the machine works, and that's of course if they like it. So you're always you're always at the whim of a record label. Not saying that that's a derogative term, because at the end of the day, it's their label. If they don't want to put it out, then they shouldn't have to, and there's no reason why they should. And if I run a label, and I have run labels in the past, it would be exactly the same. If we weren't feeling it, we didn't want to put it out, we wouldn't put it out. But obviously, if you're doing your own thing, then you're the only person who has to answer that question is you. So if you feel that it's good enough to come out, then it can come out, and there's nothing going to stop that happening. Whereas if you are with a label, they still obviously still have a say in it. So if they don't like, even if you particularly like a track, then they might not want to put it out. I mean, I'll give you an example. If any of you know the track "Deep in My Heart" that I did, see, I was happy with that track, and I know, and I gave it to James Culture Shock, and he was like, yeah, I really like this track. And like, at the end of the day, if Culture Shock's saying he likes your track, then that's good enough for me, because he's, in my opinion, he's one of the best producers out there. But yeah, I gave it to the label, and like, they weren't really. Sorry, just one sec. Yeah, they weren't really sort of. They were like, oh yeah, it's all right. But yeah, put it out, and it kind of did all right. So that was a case where I kind of had to, like, effectively persuade them to put it out, really. So, but they put it out, and it did all right. But obviously, if I was doing it myself, then I could have just put it out, and there wouldn't have been that conversation that needed to happen. So yeah, to answer your question, if you can, I would try and do it yourself. It's very difficult though, because the problem with the internet is, if you put something out there, no one really knows it's there until you draw their attention to it. So you may well have to kind of do something or other to indoctrinate, or kind of bring that to people's attention. So, for example, if you could get, if you're talking about drum and bass, and you could get it on UKF, the UKF YouTube channel, or one of the other ones that do a similar sort of thing, that'll be a massive advantage, because it gives you that kind of imprint, and it brings the attention to you. Because the problem with music these days is, like back in the day when I first started, we used to go down to the distributors, and they'd probably release 5 to 10 things a week, like 5 to 10 bits of music a week. Like, that would be 12 inches, so you're probably talking 2 tracks a side. So what's that? Sort of, I don't know, 10 to 20 bits of music coming out each week. Now I think it's something like, across all the genres and different styles of music, it's something ridiculous. It's in thousands of bits of music coming out. So you need to somehow get noticed, and that is one of the advantages of being with an established label, is that they already have the machine to set up. Like for my latest release with Ram, they did a smashing job. Do you know what I mean? Like, all the promotion and everything that they did really well, and yeah, that is obviously helpful. But I do think in these days it's not as hard to do that yourself. So bearing in mind all the advantages to being in control of your own destiny, so to speak, it's probably worth trying to do it yourself first. But do labels actually look at their SoundCloud inbox? I'm not entirely sure about SoundCloud specifically, although I'm guessing that that's probably the way most people send music these days. I would say they do, in all honesty, because they they all want to look, they're all on the lookout for the next big thing. If you have sent sorry, one sec. I mean, I'll let you into a little secret. Is no one ever says no in the music business. Yeah. So if you're expecting a no, and sorry, yeah, we didn't like this, but we like, it just doesn't happen. It just does not happen. No one ever says no. They only ever say yes. So if you don't hear anything, that is your no. And this, I don't agree with it. And if you ask me, I'll always say yes or no, because I think people deserve an opinion. But majority of the time, if in the music business, if you're sending your tunes to DJs or labels or whatever, if you haven't heard anything back, fairly soon, within 2 or 3 weeks of sending it, then the chances are they didn't like it. And it's a frustrating thing, because you would, as a person, you'd probably just rather hear no, and then you can kind of move on with your life. But unfortunately, that's just not it's not how it works. So yeah, if you've sent stuff to labels and you've not heard anything back, you can probably assume that they don't like it. But I would say 99% of the time they would probably still listen. They would actually listen to it. I certainly know Ram do. They always check out stuff. So I mean, like when I got signed to Ram, I didn't pull any special favours or do anything. I had no insight at all into that world. Although ironically, it turns out one of my mates who's quite good mates with Andy, but I only found that out like a few years after. But the bottom line is, I just approached them in the same way, and obviously what I sent them they liked enough to sort of develop it further. So yeah, another good point to make though, actually, with regards sending your stuff to people, is it's a dangerous game to do it, right? So what I mean by that is, people only have a window, like a small window of acceptance, right? So I'll give you an example. If you send someone a track and they don't like it, yeah, you'll get the benefit of the doubt the next time you send one. If you send another track and they don't like, yeah, then the benefit of doubt is dwindling. And then if you send them a third track and they don't like it, that's it. It's over. Yeah, they will never. Probably, and unless you had like a massive track in another way, that would be the only time that that respect gets re-established. So basically, what I'm saying is, if you keep delivering stuff that people aren't feeling or whatever, you will eventually get written off, and it's a kind of harder thing to come back. So what I'm saying is, be very careful what you send off. Don't send loads of stuff. No point sending 10 tracks. No one's gonna listen to 10 tracks. I would say 1 or 2, 3 absolutely at the most. Really though, 1 ought to do it. And then what you want is for that to prick their ear up, and then they come to you and say, right, well, what else have you got? Yeah, because the 1 track should be enough to sort of like open their ear to more stuff. So I would always say, if you want to send stuff off, pick your 1 best track and make sure it's a pretty good track. And also the other thing, if you really do want to get noticed as well, don't just do emulations of pre-existing tracks, because that doesn't work either. Because all especially like to give you an example, if you wanted to be signed to Ram, or if you wanted to be signed to Players or whatever, and then you do tracks that sound like Sub Focus, or they sound like Original Sin or Sub Zero or whatever, then the person at the boss of that label is just going to think, well, I've already got an artist like that. I don't need another artist like that, So the point I'm trying to make is, you need to be original basically, and you need to have your sound, And there's an easy way to get your sound, and that is don't copy anyone else. That's the bottom line. If you don't copy anyone else and you produce a song, then it is your style by default. And that's kind of actually took me a long time to realise that myself. Probably a little bit slow on the uptake, but yeah, you've got to be original basically, and not. I mean, you can draw ideas and influence. That's fine, and you can copy stuff. I mean, there's always the old quote. I forget who says it. I think it was Picasso. It might have been Picasso. He said like artists emulate genius still, or something like that. The point. There's nothing wrong with kind of nicking stuff, like especially from other genres. That's a good thing to do. You know, to incorporate, even if it's like a sound or something that you've heard in another genre, like a techno track or something, and then use that in a drum and bass track. That's fine. But as for directly emulating or being similar to other artists or other tracks, then that's not really going to get you noticed. Don't get me wrong, it does happen and people do it, but they tend to be more already established, or certainly, you know, already been noticed. But if you want to get your foot in the door, come with something that's like people haven't heard before, that's going to blow them away basically. That's the best place to be, for sure. How do you go about creating interest and change over time? What do you mean by in the track, or myself as making music? I'm assuming you mean the track. How do you go about creating interest and change over time? Just trying to think, really. Well, really, I mean, keeping interest in a track. Yeah, as you just said, it's not repeating basically, or having elements like, for instance, obviously you're gonna repeat the drums, aren't you? So that's already like that's pretty much a given. But then obviously your drums would progress, wouldn't they? So then you might start off with, and then like you add some more stuff, like some shakers or some extra percussion or whatever, and then you keep it moving like that. But then like the same way, like you might have a bass line that's doing the same pattern, and then you do a little tweak on the bass line or change it a little bit, and that's definitely the best way of keeping interest and having elements that you bring in and out and all those sort of things. Yeah, you pretty much answered the question there, I think. But any more questions? It's it's not an easy thing making music, that's for sure. It's not an easy thing. So, how many of you guys? It's not an easy thing. Thinking of a good question to ask. Yeah. How many of you guys? What sequences and doors do you all use? Oh, sorry. Did I miss your question? What was that? Let me. Go on. Could you repeat your question about the financial aspects? I can't find it at the moment. Oh, okay. No, I found it. It's alright. All right. Well, yeah, this is my full-time job. It has been since I was 18. So I spend a lot of time in the studio. I don't really know how anyone can do this and have a job as well, because to me it's like I don't know how I would get the time to have a job. Um, but I do know people. I do know people that do. I think it's sad that anyone has to really, because there should be enough money on the table really for you to be able to make a good living doing this. But it's not really the case anymore, if I'm honest, because it's just the bottom fell out of the music as a monetizable product really. Yeah, I mean, you might get 99p for a download or something, but in reality, probably 80 or 90% of that is being lost through piracy or whatever. So yeah, it's a tough living. It's not it's not an particularly easy living, because you're not got regular paycheck, much like anyone that works themselves. Um, but it is an enjoyable living. Um, but I mean, the only way really to successfully earn a living now is to be able to do music with a view to getting gigs. So that that can work out all right. Gigs can be pretty well paid really in reality. If you look at compare them to normal jobs, so to speak, in inverted commas. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's good trade off there. So it's not all doom and gloom for sure. But I mean, in particular in drum and bass, the kind of DJ market is a little bit oversaturated. There's a lot of producers and DJs, because obviously had all the original DJs who were just DJs, and then you've now got the DJ producer, so to speak, who they need to be able to DJ to be able to produce, but the music they produce gets them the DJ work, so it's a kind of like it's a circle that works nicely. Um, but it is tough. I know that there's a lot of people, they probably wouldn't say it publicly, but everyone's got their concerns, so to speak. But I don't know. I think really, with regards to music, that's going to be the case until you manage to re-establish some money actually in music itself. I'm kind of optimistic that will happen one day with streaming, because at the moment we've got a kind of mixed system where we've got some people, probably the majority now, are streaming, but you're still getting people buying downloads and stuff. But at the moment it's a mixed system, because some people are doing something and some people are doing the others, but eventually it will all go streaming. Everything will be streaming, and it wouldn't even surprise me if you weren't streaming to your CDJs, rather than putting a USB stick in. It will go that crazy. You won't even need to turn up with a USB stick anymore. You'll just sync up to your online playlist in the cloud. What with 5G and all that stuff, that's it's only a couple of years around the corner. Even your car stereo, it won't have a FM receiver or digital. It probably won't even have digital. It's just going to connect straight to the internet. So your phone, everything, your computer's probably not even going to have a hard disk. It's going to be, your hard disk will be on the cloud, and the computer's just going to be like a processor and a battery. So when that happens, people will have no choice but to stream. And what that means is, hopefully, if it's just pure streaming, then the incomes can be a little bit fairer from people like Spotify and stuff, because I think what will happen is most people won't actually knowingly have to pay for music anymore, because it'll be bundled as part of their phone package or their Sky or satellite or cable packages. So they won't even necessarily feel like paying that they're paying for music, but the artists will still be earning an income based on the number of streams. And obviously, if everyone's streaming as opposed to say 80 to 90% of the people consuming the music in a kind of off the grid way, then I think there's a possibility that the incomes could sort of re-establish itself. Because I don't know, something's got to give really, because it's going to be more and more difficult. And I think it's kind of counterproductive for the music in general, because I mean I knew one or two people back in the 90s that they had no interest in DJing at all. It just was not for them. They just liked a nice private life, and but they were like amazing producers. And now those people, they can't exist. They just can't exist. So we are musically suffering because we haven't got the variety so much in the production. And also, when you think about it, all the producers that are writing stuff at the moment, they have to write stuff that they know is going to make an impact and get them the DJ work as well. So that does restrict the creative side a bit. So yeah, it's a little bit worrying times. I mean, it's been that really like that since about 2004 for me, because that was the time that we really started to know. I mean, up until then, it was just like a party basically. Like, it was the easiest thing to do. Like, you just made tunes, you put them out on vinyl, or a record label put them out, and you got paid pretty well, really, in reality. And it was, it was good living. It was easy. You didn't have to do any of the social stuff or the social media stuff, which takes up a lot of time as well. So yeah, it was very easy. But then around about 2004, coincidentally, at the same time as broadband speeds went up, that's when you started to notice the drop off, and it's got sort of gone down ever since. But yeah, I mean, at the same time, to put a positive spin on it, there's plenty of people that are doing really well, and they're charging some crazy money on the DJ fees. So if you're in that position, I'm sure you're probably quite happy with the way things are at the moment anyway. So yeah, it's but as I said, you never know what's around the corner or what will happen. So there it's as much kind of up to the public as well, like whether they truly want to support musicians and music that they like, or they're not that bothered. Because I think if people aren't that bothered, then ultimately it might not be that good news. But as I said, that may well turn around with technology advancements and stuff. And I mean, it'd be nice to get back to a situation where people can just make a living from music, because then that takes the kind of pressure off the DJ market, and everything's a little bit more balanced, which is good. I'll answer the Bitwig one in a minute. All right. Well, thank you for thanking me for the Brainstorm VIP. Funny enough, that was you've actually got Fred V to thank for that. So he suggested that I should do a Brainstorm VIP, and I was like, all right, okay, all right. So I did one, and so it went from there. So Bitwig, what can I show you? That's cool. I'll start off with this new synth that they brought out in phase 4. Yeah, this is pretty cool. I haven't really kind of to grips 100% with it yet, but it's pretty cool all the same. There's one of the presets is wicked. Let me try and find it. Always comes out a bit loud, but so you got with this one you got the kind of four oscillators which are shown here, and then you got the that's the output. So yeah, it's kind of like they call it a phase distortion, but to me it seems just like pretty much like an FM synth, like not dissimilar to FM8 or whatever. But you can see they've added their own kind of a few effects and stuff which make it sound good. But yeah, it's a pretty good synth. I need to kind of delve into that a bit more. I think you can do something similar to this on in Cubase, I think. Wait, let's just put a little basic chord. But yeah, you can. I seem to remember you can do this in Cubase. But yeah, you can put these individual pitch bends. So instead of bending all three notes at the same time, yeah, you can pitch bend them, which is good individually. What else can I show you? Well, I showed you the MIDI and audio on the same track. I showed you bringing in stuff in from other arrangements. What else can I show you? Because there's so many things, but I'm just like I'll never know exactly what to show people. But yeah, I mean, I suppose one of the pretty cool things would be let's an example. What's that? So it shouldn't be that distorted. Oh yeah, no, that's because I put that distortion thing on the end. Yeah, so let's just use Pro 2 as an example. So yeah, just one of the cool things is to be able to modulate any of these plugins. So say for example, we could put a LFO on here to control this frequency. So all we need to do is just click on the knobs, and then it automatically brings them up here. And you can just now you can see that LFO's automating the frequency of FabFilter Pro. not that it probably sounds that good, but yeah, to give you an example. And then obviously you can change all the settings to what you want. Sync it, don't sync it. But it's not just the LFO. Obviously you can do the same. You got like this is pretty cool. This is let's just kill that. Right, sorry, dealing with some WhatsApp. One sec, sorry. Yeah. So look at this one. He's like, I don't know what. I suppose it's kind of like an AFO, but a little bit more in depth, I guess. change this to a low. Yeah, it's more like a rhythmic LFO. You got like like your normal attack decay, sustain release. Obviously macros, steps is pretty cool. It's like a step sequencer, I think. Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, I don't know if any of them have updated, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I don't think you can do this in any other door. Can you hear me? Yeah, just checking that's still on. Got the right thing. Yeah, so this is like your step sort of. I think you can do this like draw kind of. Yeah, so got that, and I've already showed you the instrument layers. You can actually, I don't know if this is like a new thing because I either never noticed before or never heard of it before. But let me give you an example. Yeah, so this is pretty cool. I think you can have like, let's put it on here anyway. Right, so you can have different, like chains of effects and stuff. So, right. So, let's choose some sort of weird effects just to kind of. Let's choose the right device. Right. Let's choose that. Sorry, yeah, I'm being a bit slow today. Do one more. Let's have a good. I mean, Bitwig, it's got this great browser, which is basically it's like one-stop shop for all your devices, devices is plug-in, in other words, presets, samples, stuff. Right. So yeah. Basically, yeah, you can switch between like different effects chains pretty quickly. So it's not a brilliant example with the things I've chosen, but you can get the theory, and I believe that you can automate these. sure there's a button. Yeah, button. That's it. So I can't remember, but anyway, you can definitely do it. You can click through different effects and stuff. Can be handy. Do some clever shit with that. And I mean, also all the way the devices work and all the way they all nest together and stuff. It's just very clever the way they've thought about everything. Trying to think what else. I mean, the big thing for me is the way all the automation integrates and stuff, and yeah, just the ease of which you can do things. But like, I like the way that you can just sort of, I don't know, just get pretty crazy with things. Like, unfortunately, it's just one of those things. It's like there's so many things you can do. Half the time you don't probably end up doing them, but you should. But like, just to give, I think like this will probably be the last thing I have to do today. But if you've got any more like final questions, let me know. But just to give you an example, let's do some stuff with just this macro here. Yeah. So this is this macro at the moment. It's not controlling anything, but we can get certainly set up to do some stuff. Let's make a new patch. Right, what I'll do. I've got it. Bitwig does have colour available. It's just I've been going through like a grey period for some reason. Oh, yeah, actually that reminds me of something that is quite, I think this is pretty unique to Serum. Sorry, Bitwig. Right, so say we've got like loads of different you know, we've got our arrangement and we're using this part in all these different places. Well, the cool thing is about Bitwig is like this track here is kind of like this track here. It's kind of a weird way to explain it, but what you see what I mean? It's like you're in the editor in most, if not all of the other doors. You're like trapped within that editor. So what you edit is you're only editing in that thing, in that particular one. Whereas with this, as you can see, it within the editor's like it's just like an extension of the track. So what goes on in here kind of goes on out there. Now, to me, there's one disadvantage, but loads of advantages. The only disadvantage is, and I was talking with Zinc about this, is that, say for example, we're in this this one particular event box, and we've got loads of different notes going on here, and we wanted to select all of them. Yeah. The only thing we've got to be careful of is if we do that, it selects all of the notes in all of these boxes, because we've got to remember that this isn't really an editor, it's just this kind of expanded, if you get me. So that's a slight disadvantage, but obviously once you know that, it's also quite handy to be able to say we want to put every velocity up in this entire track. All we do is we select all of them, so what it means is you can work on the whole everything by selecting, or you're selecting the whole track. So that can be advantageous, but for me the big thing is you can move. This is just sick. You can just move, like you can arrange from within the editor while you're editing, and I don't know, like it's like you don't. it's like one of those things. This is why I like Bitwig. You just never would have thought of that based on the conventional wisdom of what we're used to with the doors. But yeah, I really like it. I think it's a really handy feature to be able to. Looking at it here, it's not that exciting, but when you're actually working on the track, I think it is a real cool feature, and it's just a handy thing to have. Right, so let's get back to this. Right, so lovely standard square wave. Right, so let's just do something with this that's slightly interesting. So say we want to got a cut off there of that filter, so we'll do something with that, and that's now controlling that. Right, so we can adjust. Right, for a minute. So we'll put some. Right, so that's that one macro, and that's controlling that filter. Now, obviously, if you are familiar with Serum, you'll know that you can do exactly the same thing in Serum by using that macro. So yeah, that's not particularly exciting, but let's do a few more things. Right, so that's now automating that mirror as well. But again, that's nothing you can't do with Serum. So alright, but now you do have this advantage. So now we say we want to put another plug in. I'm just trying to think of something that would work well. Alright, well we'll do this in a minute. Oh, right. Alright, I've made a slight error here of where I should have done this. What I need to do is check this needs to be in a chain basically first. But this actually does give me a good example to show another good thing in Bitwig. Right, so these all need to go into this chain. So we'll recreate this macro. But what's happened here is the automation, we want it to automate this. As you can see, it's not there anymore. Well, sorry, it's not there anymore. It's just it never was there. But what we can do is we can easily copy the automation from there to there. So now that one's moving instead of that one. So we can just quickly recreate our automations that we did. So we're going to do the cut off. And we'll do the mirror here. We can actually get rid of this now. What this means now is that any plugin can all share that one macro. So we can we've got another filter in there. What else can we try? Let's try. wanted to automate that drive now. Yeah, so the beauty of it is now, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe you can do this in any other door. So now that one knob is controlling serum, it's controlling the distortion here, it's controlling the filter here. Try a bit of reverb mix. Just putting that reverb in at the point in the chain which I think it sounds the best, which I think is this. Oh, a bit more craziness, maybe a bit of that. And then if I click it at the moment, then if I click that button, it starts flashing, and then it shows how much each of these have been automated, basically. It's just such an easy way of doing it. I mean, as I remember, the last time I used Live, you had to there was this other window that opened up around here, and then you had to do numeric adjustments to decide how much you wanted it automated by. I don't know if they've changed that now, but it's just no way as intuitive as just doing it like this. It's graphically that it's there to do. It's quick. It's easy. So yeah. And one more, so I think that kind of demonstrates my point there. But let's say, for example, we like this reverb, and we like that distortion and the filter, and we wanted to use it on something else, so we'll just, for argument's sake, we'll use it on our drums here. Yeah, now we've got this. We'll just move it down here. Right, now check out how easy this is to copy this automation. That was just me selecting it, pressing Command D, and it just copies it across. Now, like I said, say we wanted to use this effect on our drums as well, right? All we need to do, we just copy this, right? It doesn't matter that it's got a VST instrument on it. That doesn't matter, right? Watch. Just copy it onto here. Hold down Alt to copy it. Now it probably won't play. No, because it's got a wait a minute. Right, hang on. I'll just need to do that again. Put it in the right place. Let's just collapse all these. Get rid of this. Right. Right, so let's copy this again. Right, yeah, it won't play because there's a VST. Let's get rid of that. So we've managed to copy that exact same, but check this. It's fucking even copied the automation. Yeah, see what I mean? That's just sick. It's like, they just really thought of everything. So, yeah, it's just, and another thing, say, just to give an example, right, so we wanted to do, now, bear in mind that this is plug-in automation, yeah, what we've got here. But don't worry about that. So we wanted to do a pitch bend now, which I'm sure, as you know, will be MIDI information, completely different type of information as far as any other DAW's concerned. But say we wanted to, for some reason, this won't sound very good, but say for some reason we wanted to mirror the pitch bend exactly the same as this, we can actually just copy the automation, the filter, whatever automation, we can copy that, and that is now pitch bend. Just oh no, hang on. I've done the wrong thing. Right, I've actually that's the wrong one. Right, let's just set pitch bend. Plus 12. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, basically that's I think all the major points. The rest is just kind of refining, and I just like, it's just the workflow. They've just got rid of all the unnecessary shit, and yeah, kept it all nice. There's probably one or two other things I need to think of, but I'll have to let you know next time. But as for now, thanks for I'm going to shoot off, but thanks for watching, and thanks for all your questions. I hope I've managed to answer them all. Yep, I think so. And yeah, hopefully do something similar to this again soon. All right, take it easy. See ya. Bye.